Good day. It is a privilege to speak with you, though the subject of our discourse today is practically grim. We are gathered here in this digital agora not to debate abstract theories of political economy, but to confront a reality that the establishment in Brussels, Berlin, and Paris dare not whisper, let alone proclaim from a podium. For years, I and a few others have been warning that the architecture of the European Union, specifically the Eurozone, was fundamentally flawed, a magnificent cathedral built on quicksand. We argued that without radical reform, without a democratic and fiscal union to match its monetary one, it would inevitably buckle under the weight of its own contradictions. We were dismissed as alarmists, as populists, as Cassandras, yet today I stand before you to declare with profound sadness that the time for warnings has passed. We are no longer discussing a theoretical possibility. We are witnessing an unfolding historical event. The economic collapse of Europe as a prosperous, unified, and relevant global force is no longer just a theory. It has become inevitable. The event horizon has been crossed. What we are experiencing now, the stagnation, the political fragmentation, the deindustrialization, are not merely headwinds, but the undeniable symptoms of a terminal condition. To understand why this collapse is now baked into the cake, we must move beyond the superficial headlines and look at the tectonic plates of the European economy, which are grinding against each other with destructive force. The foundational error, the original sin of the euro, was the creation of a single century without a single state to back it up. It was a neoliberal fantasy that stripped nations of their monetary sovereignty, the ability to devalue their currency or print money in a crisis, while imposing rigid fiscal straitjackets that prevented them from using government spending to stimulate their economies during a downturn. This system was designed for fair weather, a luxury yacht that would capsize in the first serious storm. That storm arrived in 2008, and the response from the European establishment was not to fix the ship, but to throw the passengers overboard. Instead of a new deal for Europe, instead of a massive program of green investment to rebuild and unify, we got the most savage program of austerity in modern history. The cost of the banking crisis, a crisis born of reckless speculation by private French and German banks, was transferred onto the shoulders of the poorest taxpayers in Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. Entire societies were hollowed out to save a bankrupt financial sector. This was not an economic policy, it was a morality play, a punitive expedition that permanently crippled the demand side of the European economy. The result of this lost decade was not a recovery, but the creation of a permanent stagnation machine. Europe turned itself into a continent of debt bondage and low growth. And while the South was being crushed by austerity, the North, led by Germany, doubled down on an equally destructive model: mercantilism. Germany's economic success was built on a simple, unsustainable premise: wage suppression at home to create massive trade surpluses abroad. But in a monetary union, one country's surplus is by mathematical necessity another's deficit. For Germany to be the powerhouse, the European South had to be the poorhouse. This imbalance is the poison pill at the heart of the Eurozone. Without a mechanism to recycle these surpluses, to tax the rich regions and invest in the poor ones, as every functioning federation from the United States to Australia does, the divergence between the core and the periphery was bound to become unbridgeable. We created a monetary union that amplified wealth for the few and entrenched poverty for the many, and now this fragile, unbalanced house of cards has been hit by a perfect storm of new crises that have shattered any lingering illusion of stability. The most critical of these is the energy shock and the subsequent deindustrialization of the European core. For decades, the German industrial machine, the engine of the entire European economy, relied on a Faustian bargain: cheap, abundant natural gas from Russia. That era is over, abruptly and irreversibly terminated by the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical severing of ties with Moscow. The consequences are catastrophic and are unfolding in real time. We are seeing energy prices in Europe that are permanently multiples higher than in the United States or Asia. This has rendered vast swathes of European heavy industry uncompetitive overnight. Look at the news. It is not just a temporary. Chemical giants like BASF are scaling back production in Germany and building massive new complexes in China. Steel manufacturers, aluminum smelters, fertilizer plants, the very bedrock of an industrial economy, are shutting down furnaces or relocating. This is not a cyclical downturn, it is structural deindustrialization. The German business model is broken. Its car industry, once the envy of the world, is being squeezed between high energy costs, a delayed transition to electric vehicles, and fierce competition from China. When the engine of Europe stalls, the entire train comes to a halt. The ripple effects are being felt across the continent, from the suppliers in northern Italy to the ports of Rotterdam. Europe is losing its ability to make things that the rest of the world wants to buy at a competitive price. Simultaneously, Europe is being crushed in a geopolitical vise between the United States and China. Our so-called allies in Washington have launched a full-scale economic war on European industry, thinly veiled as climate policy. The Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, in the US, is a massive program of protectionist subsidies designed to suck green capital and technology across the Atlantic. European companies are being lured to the US by the promise of cheap energy and government handouts, leaving Europe's own green transition starved of investment. Brussels' response to this existential threat has been pathetic, a mixture of feeble complaints and a relaxed state aid regime that only benefits rich countries like Germany and France that can afford to subsidize their own industries, further fragmenting the single market. We are being deindustrialized by our enemies and cannibalized by our friends. Adding insult to injury is the policy of the European Central Bank. Confronted with inflation that was primarily driven by supply-side shocks, energy prices and broken supply chains, the ECB under Christine Lagarde has resorted to the only tool in its neoliberal playbook: blunt, aggressive interest rate hike. They are trying to cure a supply problem by crushing demand. It is like trying to put out a fire by blowing up the house. These rate hikes are not bringing down energy prices, but they are strangling investment, bankrupting small businesses, and making mortgages unaffordable for millions of families. We are walking into a completely avoidable recession engineered by central bankers who are fighting the last war with the wrong weapons. The real estate sector across the continent is already showing cracks, a grim reminder of. If you find this analysis valuable and want to support open, critical dialogue on these vital issues, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments section below which city and country you are watching from. The economic collapse is driving a political collapse. The rise of the far right across Europe, from Meloni in Italy to the AfD in Germany to Le Pen in France, is not some inexplicable phenomenon. It is the direct, logical consequence of the center's failure. When mainstream politicians tell you that there is no alternative to austerity, that deindustrialization is just a bump in the road, and that your falling living standards are a necessary sacrifice for the greater good, people will eventually turn to anyone who promises to burn the whole system down. The European establishment has created a vacuum of hope, and it is being filled by monsters. The political fragmentation is now so deep that the possibility of any coherent, Europe-wide reform is zero. We cannot even agree on a common budget to buy ammunition for Ukraine, let alone a fiscal union to save our own economy. The reimposition of the Kafkaesque fiscal rules, the Stability and Growth Pact, in 2024 will only accelerate the disaster, forcing countries to cut investment just as they need it most to transition their energy systems and rebuild their defense capabilities. It is a suicide pact. So, when I say the collapse is inevitable, I do not mean that tomorrow morning the euro will vanish and we will be living in a Mad Max wasteland. Collapse is a process, not an event. It will look like a long, painful slide into irrelevant. It will look like a continent that is a museum of its past glories, a tourist destination for the newly rich of Asia and America, but no longer a center of innovation, production, or power. It will look like a society with ever-deepening inequality, where a shrinking middle class fights over the scraps, while public services crumble. It will be a Europe of walled communities and decaying infrastructure, of political paralysis and social unrest. The dream of a prosperous, social democratic Europe is dead. It was killed by a ruling class that preferred to cling to a failed ideology rather than face reality. What remains is the slow, agonizing process of decomposition. Our task now is not to save a system that is beyond saving, but to prepare for what comes after, to build lifeboats of solidarity and local resilience, and to analyze ruthlessly how we got here, so that one day perhaps we can build something better on the ruin. But make no mistake, the ruin is upon us. Please note that this channel is an unofficial platform for commentary and analysis, and is not affiliated, associated, authorized, endorsed by, or in any way officially connected with Yanis Varoufakis or any of his political organizations.